I am James Washington, 77 years old, a retired school principal who spent 4 decades shaping young minds in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I am also a widower of 15 years, a father who raised his daughter Alicia alone after cancer took my wife Dorothy when Alicia was just 27. People in my community know me as the man who never missed a parent-teacher conference, who volunteered at the church every Sunday, and who always had his wallet open when family needed help. What they are about to witness is the man I became when that generosity was mistaken for weakness. My daughter Alicia is 42 now, married to Brad Zimmerman, a sales executive with expensive tastes and a talent for spending other people's money. 6 months ago, they came to me with tears in their eyes, explaining how the bank refused to approve their mortgage without a larger down payment. The house on Oak Avenue was their dream, they said, their fresh start. I did not hesitate. I wrote a check for $129,000 from my retirement savings money I had carefully set aside over decades of modest living and careful planning. Alicia hugged me tight that day, called me the best father in the world. Brad shook my hand, promised they would pay me back once his next commission came through. That promise, like so many others, evaporated into empty air. 3 weeks ago, I planned a trip to Italy. Not just any trip, but the journey Dorothy and I had dreamed about for years before her diagnosis stole that future from us. I researched restaurants, mapped walking tours through Rome, booked tickets to the Vatican. I invited Alicia and Brad to join me, my treat, one last family adventure before my knees gave out completely. They accepted enthusiastically. Alicia even helped me pick out a new suitcase. Everything was set. Our flight was leaving in 4 hours. I had that suitcase open on my bed, halfway packed with the clothes I had carefully selected, when my phone buzzed. A text from Alicia. I expected flight details, maybe a reminder about meeting at the airport. Instead, the message stopped my heart cold. Dad, change of plans. Brad thinks this trip should be immediate family only. You understand, right? Immediate family. I read those words 3 times, trying to make them mean something different. I was her father. I raised her alone. I paid for the trip. I paid for their house. And suddenly I was not immediate family. My hands shook as I typed back the only word I could manage. Okay. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that text until the screen went dark. The disappointment settled into my chest like a stone. But disappointment was just the beginning. What I discovered next and what I did about it, well, they never saw that coming. Neither did anyone else in Cedar Falls. Before I continue this story, I need you to understand something. This is not about revenge. This is about a 77-year-old man who finally learned the difference between being loved and being useful. I closed that suitcase slowly, each snap of the metal clasps echoing through my bedroom like a door slamming shut on a dream 15 years in the making. The blue cotton shirt I had been folding still sat on the bed, wrinkled now from where my hands had gripped it too tightly. I smoothed it out and put it back in my dresser drawer. No point in packing for a trip that was not happening anymore. The airline put me on hold for 6 minutes. I listened to generic jazz music while staring at the ceiling, counting the small cracks in the plaster I kept meaning to fix. When the representative finally picked up, her voice was cheerful and professional. "I need to cancel my reservation," I said. "I am so sorry to hear that, Mr. Washington. Is everything all right?" Everything was not all right, but I was not about to explain that to a stranger. Just a change of plans. She processed the cancellation efficiently, explaining the refund timeline and confirmation numbers I barely heard. After I hung up, the house felt different. Quieter. I had lived alone for 15 years, ever since Dorothy passed, but this was a new kind of silence, the kind that reminded you exactly how alone you really were. I walked into the living room and sat in my armchair, the same one I had sat in every evening since we bought this house in 1987. From this spot, I could see the framed photograph on the mantel. Dorothy, age 49, taken 2 months before her diagnosis. She was laughing at something I said, her head tilted back, eyes bright with joy. I remembered that moment clearly. We had been planning our retirement, talking about all the places we would visit once I left the school system. Italy was at the top of her list. She wanted to see the Sistine Chapel, to stand in the Colosseum, to eat real Italian gelato in a small cafe somewhere in Tuscany. Cancer took all of that away, took her away, left me with a 12-year-old daughter who suddenly did not have a mother and a future that looked nothing like the one we had imagined together. I raised Alicia alone after that. Every parent-teacher meeting, every dance recital, every late night when she had nightmares about losing me too. I learned how to braid hair from YouTube videos. I figured out which tampons to buy when she was too embarrassed to ask. I worked full-time as a principal while making sure she never felt the absence of her mother more than she already did. When she got into college, I took out loans to cover what scholarships did not. When she graduated, I was in the front row holding flowers and blinking back tears. When she got married, I walked her down the aisle and gave Brad my blessing, even though something in my gut told me he was not good enough for her. She would have known what to do. Dorothy would have seen this coming, somehow would have warned me, would have told me to set boundaries years ago. But Dorothy was not here, and I had spent 15 years trying to be enough parent for two. Sitting in that quiet house, staring at my wife's photograph, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet, just a question that settled heavy in my chest. Was I really too much of a burden? Had I become the kind of father who demanded too much attention, who needed too much care, who got in the way of his daughter's happiness? The doubt crept in like cold water, and I let it. Evening settled over the house like a heavy blanket. I had moved through the afternoon in a daze, leaving my dinner plate sitting unwashed in the sink, which was unlike me. That packed suitcase still stood by my bedroom door, a constant reminder of plans that would never happen. I turned on the television to some news program I was not really watching, just needing noise to fill the emptiness. My phone sat on the coffee table screen, dark and silent. I picked it up without thinking, just needing something to do with my hands. Maybe scrolling through social media would help distract me from the hollow feeling in my chest. I opened Facebook and started mindlessly moving my thumb across the screen past the usual posts from church members, former colleagues sharing retirement updates, and old students announcing weddings and babies. Then I saw it. Richard and Patricia Zimmerman, Brad's parents, standing directly in front of the Coliseum, both of them smiling wide at the camera with that unmistakable look of tourists who had found the perfect photo spot. Patricia wore a bright red scarf, Richard had his arm around her shoulders, and the ancient Roman amphitheater rose behind them in all its weathered glory. The caption underneath made my blood stop moving in my veins. Best family vacation ever. So blessed to be here. #Rome. Blessed #Italy trip. The timestamp showed it had been posted 3 hours ago. My thumb froze above the screen. I stared at that photo, trying to make it mean something different than what it clearly meant. Maybe they had taken a different trip. Maybe this was an old photo they had just decided to post now. Maybe there was some explanation that made sense. Some reason why Brad's parents would be in Rome at the exact same time my daughter was supposed to be on her immediate family-only vacation. My heart started beating faster as I tapped on Patricia's profile to look at more pictures. And there it was. Same location, same time frame, but this photo had 4 people in it. Richard and Patricia Zimmerman, Brad and Alicia, all of them grouped together in front of some charming Roman cafe with outdoor seating near the Trevi fountain. Wine glasses sat on the table behind them, the fountain's Baroque sculptures visible in the background. They looked happy, relaxed, like a family enjoying a wonderful vacation together. Alicia had written a caption that made my stomach feel like it was falling through the floor. So grateful for family time in the eternal city, creating memories that will last forever. Heart emoji. I sat there counting the faces in that photograph with fingers that had started shaking. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. My lips moved as I counted silently, as if saying the numbers out loud would somehow change the total. But no matter how many times I counted, the answer stayed the same. 4 people, not 5. That word family burned itself into my brain like a hot brand pressed against skin. Family time. Immediate family only. Creating memories together. I scrolled back up to the first photo, then down to the second one, then back up again, my thumb moving frantically across the screen as if the images would change if I just looked at them enough times. They had not excluded me because the trip was only for immediate family. They had excluded me and then invited Brad's parents instead. Richard and Patricia, who they saw maybe 4 times a year, who had never contributed a single dollar toward their house or their wedding or their life together. Those were the family members worthy of joining them in Italy. Those were the people they wanted to create lasting memories with. I put the phone down on the coffee table very carefully, as if it might explode if I moved too quickly. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened television screen. A 77-year-old man sitting alone in his living room while his daughter and her husband posted smiling vacation photos from the trip he had planned following the itinerary he had researched, visiting the restaurants he had bookmarked. Without him, the feeling of betrayal hit me in waves, each one stronger than the last. I picked up my phone again, telling myself, maybe I had misunderstood somehow, maybe those photos would show something different if I just looked one more time. But there they were, still posted with recent timestamps, their faces still beaming with that carefree joy that comes from a perfect vacation. All four of them together in the city I had dreamed about visiting with Dorothy, enjoying the plans I had made following the schedule I had created over hours of careful research. I walked to my kitchen window and caught sight of my own face reflected in the glass, pale and drawn with dark circles under my eyes. Behind my reflection, I could still see their group photo glowing on my phone screen, their happiness mixing with the image of me standing there alone. The contrast was sharp and painful, a picture that showed me exactly what my place was in their version of family. That word family, the one Alicia had used so casually in her caption, felt like it was burning holes through my chest. I barely slept that night. I spent that night tossing and turning in bed, images of their vacation flashing through my mind every time I closed my eyes. Patricia's red scarf, Richard's proud smile, Alicia's caption about family time. When morning finally came, with dull gray light creeping through my bedroom curtains, I knew I could not let this go without answers. I needed to understand why this had happened, needed to hear her explain how she could do this to her own father. My coffee cup trembled slightly in my hands as I sat at my kitchen table, rehearsing in my head what I would say. With the time difference, it was already afternoon in Rome, the perfect time to call. My finger hovered over her contact name for a long moment before I finally pressed it. The international ringtone sounded expensive, each ring echoing in my ear like a countdown. It rang 3 times, then 4. Then I heard her voice, bright and cheerful and completely unbothered. "Hey, Dad." I could hear noise in the background, lots of it. Brad talking to someone, street sounds, the busy atmosphere of an Italian city full of tourists and locals going about their day. She sounded happy, relaxed, like nothing was wrong. "I saw the photos on Facebook," I said, skipping any greeting, getting straight to the point. "Richard and Patricia are with you in Rome." There was a pause, a long one. I heard her take a breath, heard the background noise shift as she probably stepped away from the group to have this conversation somewhere more private. "Dad, we can explain everything," she said, and her voice had changed, taking on that defensive tone I recognized from when she was a teenager caught doing something she knew was wrong. "You told me this trip was for immediate family only," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "So I need you to explain to me what I am. What am I to you, Alicia?" Another pause. When she spoke again, the defensiveness had been replaced by something colder, something that made my chest tighten. "Dad, listen. Brad said you can be well demanding sometimes. He did not want you. He did not want his vacation ruined." "Okay." The word hit me like a physical blow. Ruining it. I planned this entire trip. I researched every restaurant, mapped out every walking tour, booked every ticket. I paid for your flights, Alicia. I paid for everything. "And Brad's parents paid their own way," she shot back, her voice sharp now. "They bought their own tickets. They are covering their own expenses. They do not expect us to babysit them constantly or check on them every 5 minutes. Babysit. That word landed even harder than the first one. Babysit you. Is that what you think I would have done? I heard her exhale, heard what sounded like frustration or maybe annoyance, I could not tell which. Honestly, Dad, Brad was right about this. You need too much attention. You always have. I sat there in my kitchen phone pressed to my ear, unable to form words. Too much attention. Those 4 words felt like they were burning themselves into my brain, branding themselves across every memory I had of raising her alone, of sacrificing my own needs and wants and dreams to make sure she had everything she needed. I helped support you. I finally managed to say, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. I have always been there for you. That was something you decided to do. She cut me off, her tone icy now. We never asked you to do any of that. You cannot use it to make us feel guilty now. In the background, I could hear Brad laughing about something completely unrelated. His voice sounded carefree and light, completely unaware of or unbothered by the conversation his wife was having with her father. Hearing that sound, that careless laughter, made my teeth clench together so hard my jaw ached. "To be completely honest with you, Dad," Alicia continued, and her voice was getting harder with every word she spoke, "Brad was absolutely right about this. You need too much attention. You always want us to include you in everything. Always want updates and calls and visits. It is exhausting." My phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hand. The kitchen, my kitchen where I had made her breakfast every morning for years, where I had helped her with homework at the same table where I had celebrated every birthday and holiday and achievement, suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. "I understand now," I said quietly. "Good," she replied, and I could hear relief in her voice, like she was glad this conversation was finally over. "We can talk more about this when we get back home, okay? We will sit down and have a real conversation about boundaries and expectations." "I understand completely," I repeated, and something in my tone must have registered because she went quiet for a second. "Okay then. We will talk soon, Dad." I ended the call without saying goodbye. I set the phone down on the table very carefully, very deliberately, like it might shatter if I moved too quickly. That phrase, "need too much attention," kept playing over and over in my head like a song stuck on repeat that I could not turn off no matter how hard I tried. I found myself walking to my home office, pulled there by something I could not quite name. The walls were covered with family photographs going back decades. There was one of me teaching Alicia how to ride a bicycle, my hands steady on the back of her seat while she pedaled nervously. Her college graduation photo where I stood beside her in my best suit, pride written all over my face. Her wedding day where I walked her down the aisle with tears of joy streaming down my cheeks, believing I was giving her to a man who would treat her the way she deserved. My hands slowly closed into fists as I looked at all these images of a relationship I had apparently been completely wrong about. In that photograph of baby Alicia, I was holding her against my chest, both of us smiling at the camera. She could not have been more than 6 months old. My reflection in the glass frame showed a different man now, older and harder, with something cold starting to grow behind his eyes. I reached out and straightened the frame with small, careful movements. That simple action felt important somehow, like I was fixing more than just a crooked photograph. I stayed there in my office long after that phone call ended, surrounded by all the proof of what I had thought was love, but was apparently just me being useful. Every single photo on that wall was telling a story I was only now starting to understand correctly. The wedding photo drew my attention again. I had spent $48,000 on that day, making sure every detail was perfect because I wanted her to be happy. I had hired the best photographer in Cedar Falls, booked the country club reception hall, paid for her dress alterations, covered the cost of flowers that matched her exact vision. And looking at that photo now, really looking at it for the first time, I realized something I had missed on the actual day. I was barely in any of the shots. The photographer had focused almost entirely on Brad's family, Richard and Patricia front and center in group photo after group photo, Brad's siblings and cousins filling the frames, and me, when I appeared at all, pushed to the edges or cut off halfway like an afterthought someone remembered to include at the last minute. The college graduation picture hung beside it. I had covered her student loan payments in full when Brad could not find work after his own graduation. $27,000 paid directly to the university over 4 years, making sure my little girl could finish her education without the burden of debt that crushed so many young people. She had hugged me at graduation, told me she could never thank me enough. But apparently, according to the conversation we just had, I had decided to do that, too. She had never asked for it. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder where I kept important financial documents. Bank statements and receipts I had been saving out of habit, never really thinking about what they added up to until this moment. I spread them across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. The down payment paperwork for their house. $129,000 that came directly out of my retirement savings account. Money I had been putting away for 30 years, planning for a comfortable old age where Dorothy and I could travel and relax and enjoy the life we had worked so hard to build. But Dorothy was gone, and that money had gone to buy a house for my daughter and her husband, a house they said was their dream home, their fresh start. Car payment receipts from 2 years ago, when Brad lost his sales position and they could not make their monthly payments. I had covered 6 months of payments at $473 each, making sure they did not lose their vehicle or damage their credit score. Credit card statements where I had paid off their balances when they could not manage their spending. 3 separate times over the past 5 years. The amounts varied, but they added up to more than $18,000 total. And then the vacation fund. My vacation fund. I had been building it for years, adding a little bit each month, dreaming about the trip to Italy that Dorothy and I had planned before cancer stole her away. That fund had paid for their plane tickets to Rome. First-class tickets at $2,300 each because Alicia said the long flight would be unbearable in economy. I had downgraded my own ticket to coach to make the budget work, but in the end, none of that mattered because I was not on the plane at all. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. When I added everything together, every dollar I had given them over the years, it came to well over $200,000. Maybe closer to $250,000 if I really sat down and went through every receipt, every check, every bank transfer. But it was not just about the money. As I stared at those documents, I started remembering all the other things I had given up. Things that went deeper than dollars and cents. The fishing trip with my old colleagues from the school that I had canceled because Alicia needed me to watch her house while they went on a weekend getaway. The woman from my church book club who had asked me to dinner, a kind widow named Gloria, who I had told no because Alicia needed help moving furniture to their new place. My own dreams and plans and possibilities all set aside over and over again while I prioritized their needs above my own. Those Sunday dinners where Brad barely looked at me. Holiday gatherings where I felt like an outsider in my own daughter's home. All the subtle ways he had made me feel unwelcome while simultaneously taking my financial support. The pattern was so obvious now. I could not believe I had missed it for so long. I confused generosity with love. I had spent years giving and giving and giving, believing that my sacrifice proved how much I cared, believing that supporting them financially was the same as being a good father. They had returned that generosity with manipulation, taking everything I offered while making me feel like I was the problem, like I was asking for too much, like my presence was a burden they tolerated rather than a gift they cherished. I was not their father. I was their ATM. I sat in my office for a long time after organizing those financial documents, staring at the proof of my own foolishness spread across my desk. The afternoon light coming through the window had shifted, casting long shadows across the walls covered with family photos that suddenly felt like evidence in a trial I had not realized I was part of. My laptop sat closed on the corner of my desk. I reached out and opened it slowly, watching the screen come to life with its familiar glow. My hands moved, almost automatically navigating to my banking app, entering my password, waiting for the main account page to load. The balance showed clearly at the top, my retirement savings significantly depleted after that $129,000 down payment 6 months ago. But that was not what made my breath catch in my throat. Below my account information, there was a section labeled Authorized Users. One name appeared in that list: Alicia Washington Zimmerman. Added to my account in 2019, given full access to use my credit card for emergencies. I had set that up when she was building her credit history, wanting to help her establish a good financial foundation. Emergency access, I had told her, for real emergencies only. My finger hovered over the trackpad cursor floating above the small settings icon next to her name. One click would open the options menu. Another click would remove her access entirely. One simple action that would change everything between us, that would signal I was done being their financial safety net, their backup plan, their ATM machine. The cursor stayed frozen there, hovering while my mind raced through the implications. If I removed her access, she would know immediately. The next time she tried to use that card, it would decline. She would call me angry and confused and demanding to know what I had done. We would have another conversation like the one we just had, maybe worse. The bridge between us, already damaged, might collapse completely. My hand trembled slightly on the trackpad. The power to act was right there, literally at my fingertips. One click and I could start setting the boundaries I should have established years ago. One click and I could stop being useful and start being respected, or at least stop being used. But something held me back. Maybe it was the last remnant of the man I had been that morning, the father who still wanted to believe his daughter loved him despite the evidence mounting against that belief. Maybe it was fear of what would happen if I really committed to this path, if I really stopped enabling their lifestyle and their disrespect. Maybe it was just exhaustion from the emotional roller coaster this day had become. I moved the cursor away from that settings icon and closed the laptop very carefully. The screen went dark, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the black glass. Some decisions needed planning, not impulse. Some actions required thought and strategy, not just emotional reaction. If I was going to do something, if I was going to really change the dynamic between us, I needed to be smart about it. Calculated. Deliberate. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the streetlight outside move across the plaster as cars drove past. My mind kept circling back to that moment at my laptop, that hovering cursor, that choice I had made not to act yet. But the determination had formed solid and heavy in my chest. Something was going to change. I just had to figure out exactly what and exactly when. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains. I got up, made coffee, went through my normal routine on autopilot. My phone sat on the kitchen counter where I had left it, screen dark and silent. I picked it up to check the time, and that is when I saw the notification. Banking alert. Transaction processed. I opened the app with a sense of dread that proved immediately justified. The transaction details appeared on screen, stark and undeniable. $947. Il Convivio Restaurant, Rome, Italy. Timestamp showing it had processed 3 hours ago, which meant it was their lunchtime in Rome. Alicia had used the authorized user card, the emergency access I had given her years ago, to pay for what appeared to be an extremely expensive meal at one of Rome's most upscale restaurants. The irony burned like acid in my throat. They had excluded me from their family vacation, told me I was too demanding and needed too much attention, made me feel like a burden they were relieved to leave behind. But they were using my money, my credit card, my emergency access to fund their fancy Roman lunches, while I sat alone in my kitchen drinking coffee and processing their betrayal. I scrolled through the recent transactions with growing disbelief that quickly transformed into something colder and harder. Hotel charges. $230 at some boutique called Elegant Styles Roma, attraction tickets for the Vatican museums, gelato shop purchases, wine bar tabs, all of it charged to my card over the past 3 days while Alicia posted photos about grateful family time and creating lasting memories. My thumb kept moving, revealing charge after charge, expense after expense. They were not just using my card for emergencies, they were funding their entire luxury vacation on my dime while simultaneously telling me I was not family enough to actually be there with them. Brad's parents had supposedly paid their own way according to Alicia, but apparently Brad and Alicia themselves felt perfectly comfortable charging everything to the father, who was too needy to invite along. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter and looked out the window at the morning sun rising over Cedar Falls. The elderly couple across the street were taking their morning walk together, holding hands like they had probably done for decades. Normal people living normal lives with normal family relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. That thought crystallized everything. This was my moment, not the moment at my laptop last night when I had hesitated and closed the screen. This moment right now, looking at those transaction notifications and feeling the last piece of doubt dissolve away. They had shown me exactly who they were and what I meant to them. Now it was time to show them who I could be when I finally stopped confusing generosity with love. I opened my laptop. The laptop screen glowed in front of me, cursor blinking in the search bar. My coffee had gone cold in its mug, forgotten while I navigated back to the banking app and found the card management section. The interface loaded quickly, displaying all my account information in neat rows and columns that suddenly felt like they represented so much more than just numbers and dates. There it was. The authorized users section, exactly where I had looked the night before but had not been ready to act on. One name sat in that list like an accusation. Alicia Washington Zimmerman. Authorized user. Added March 2019. I remembered that day clearly now. She had just gotten married, was trying to build her credit score, nervous about being able to qualify for loans and mortgages in the future. I had reassured her, told her adding her as an authorized user on my excellent credit history would help her establish her own financial foundation. Emergency access only we had agreed, for real emergencies, true needs situations where she genuinely required help. As I stared at her name on that screen, my phone buzzed with another notification, another banking alert. I picked it up and read the new transaction that had just processed. $143. Elegant Styles Roma. Timestamp showing it happened moments ago. She was shopping. Right now, while I sat in my kitchen processing the betrayal of the past 24 hours, while I looked at financial records showing how thoroughly they had used me, while I came to terms with the fact that I was nothing more than a funding source to them, she was shopping at some trendy Roman boutique, probably buying a scarf or a handbag or some piece of overpriced clothing she would wear once and forget about, using my emergency credit card to do it. My hand tightened around the phone. The anger that had been building since I saw those Facebook photos crystallized into something sharp and focused. This was not about the money, not really. $143 would not break me. Even $947 for lunch would not ruin my retirement. But the principle, the absolute disrespect, the casual way they used my resources while excluding me from their lives, that was what burned. I set the phone down and returned my full attention to the laptop screen. My cursor moved to hover over the small settings icon next to Alicia's name. A drop-down menu appeared with several options. Manage spending limits. View transaction history. Remove user. Remove user. Those two words seemed to glow brighter than everything else on the screen. My finger rested on the trackpad, applying just enough pressure to keep the cursor steady, but not enough to click yet. This was the moment. This was the decision that would change everything between us. Once I clicked that option, there would be no pretending things were fine, no going back to the comfortable fiction that we were a normal, loving family with normal, loving relationships. I clicked it. A confirmation dialog box appeared immediately, white text on a blue background, asking me a question I had already answered in my heart. Are you sure you want to remove this authorized user? This action cannot be undone. The user will immediately lose access to this account and will be unable to make charges or withdrawals. My cursor moved to the yes button. I did not hesitate this time. I did not second guess or doubt or worry about the consequences. I simply clicked. The screen refreshed. A new message appeared in green text at the top of the page. Authorized user access successfully revoked. Alicia Washington Zimmerman no longer has access to this account. I sat back in my chair and took a long, deep breath. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Control. Real control over my own life, my own resources, my own boundaries. Not the illusion of control that comes from saying yes to every request and believing that makes you generous. Actual control that comes from saying no and meaning it. The morning sun had fully risen now, filling my kitchen with warm light that felt appropriate somehow. I got up and made a fresh pot of coffee, taking my time with the process, enjoying the simple ritual of measuring grounds and pouring water. While the machine burbled and hissed, I sat back down at my laptop and left the banking app open on the screen, that green confirmation message still visible. I poured myself a cup of the fresh coffee, added cream the way I liked it, and returned to my seat at the kitchen table. Then I simply sat there, sipping my coffee, slowly waiting. It would not take long. The next time Alicia tried to use that card, maybe for lunch, maybe for another shopping trip, maybe for whatever expensive activity they had planned for this afternoon in Rome, the transaction would decline. And then she would call, and I would be ready. The next morning arrived with clear skies and comfortable temperatures, the kind of Iowa spring day that usually put me in a good mood. I was sitting at my kitchen table with the newspaper spread in front of me and a fresh cup of coffee in my hand when my phone started ringing aggressively on the counter. The screen lit up with an international number I recognized immediately. 9 o'clock in the morning here meant 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Rome. Right about the time they would be sitting down for a late lunch at some expensive restaurant, ordering wine and appetizers, getting ready to hand over a credit card to pay for it all. I let it ring once, took a sip of my coffee, let it ring twice, set down my cup carefully on its coaster. Then, moving with deliberate calm, I walked over and picked up the phone, swiping to answer. "Good morning, Alicia," I said, my voice even and pleasant like this was any other casual conversation between a father and daughter. "Dad, what did you do to the card?" Her voice came through sharp and panicked, high-pitched in a way that told me she was barely controlling herself. "I removed your authorized user access," I replied simply, returning to my seat at the table and picking up my coffee again. "I just tried to pay for lunch and it declined." She was nearly shouting now. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" We were sitting there with Richard and Patricia, and the waiter came back to our table 4 times saying the card was not working. 4 times, "Dad." I took another slow sip of coffee before responding. "That must have been very embarrassing for you." "Embarrassing?" Her voice could have shattered glass. "It was absolutely mortifying. You cannot just do this. I need that card." "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about our conversation yesterday," I said calmly. "About how you said I need too much attention, about how I am apparently too demanding. It seemed like maybe you did not need my financial attention either. That is completely different, and you know it. Is it?" I asked, genuinely curious what mental gymnastics she would perform to explain the difference. "You do not want me physically present because I am too needy, but you want my credit card available for your luxury Roman lunches." There was silence on the other end. Not the thoughtful kind of silence where someone is considering what you said and reflecting on their behavior. This was the angry kind of silence, the kind that comes right before an explosion. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, Brad's voice too quiet to make out the words, but the tone clearly urgent, clearly coaching her on what to say next. When Alicia spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The panic was gone, replaced by something icy and threatening that I had never heard from her before. "You need to fix this right now. Do you understand me right now? Or there are going to be serious consequences." I set my coffee cup down, giving her my full attention. "What consequences would those be, Alicia?" "Brad and I have been discussing some options," she said, and each word came out clipped and cold. "We have been talking about this for a while, actually, and this situation just proves we were right. When we get back home to Cedar Falls, we are going to start looking into care facilities for you." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. "Care facilities?" "You are getting older, Dad. 77 years old, and you clearly cannot manage your finances responsibly anymore, making impulsive decisions like cutting off my card access without even discussing it first. That shows poor judgment. Declining mental capacity, probably." I could hear Brad's voice more clearly now in the background, feeding her lines. "Tell him it is for his own good. Brad says this is really for your own benefit," Alicia continued, her voice taking on a false sweetness that made my stomach turn. "You should not be living alone in that big house anyway. You do not need all that space. It is too much for you to maintain. So we will need to sell it to cover the costs of your care facility. A nice assisted living place where you will have people checking on you all the time, making sure you are taking your medications, not making any more bad financial decisions." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Sell my house. The house I had lived in for 38 years. The house where I had raised Alicia after her mother died. The house I had paid off completely 15 years ago. The house that was mine, fully and legally mine, with only my name on the deed. They wanted to sell it out from under me and use the money to warehouse me in some facility where I would be convenient and quiet and out of their way. "You do not need all that room anyway," she continued, "just rattling around in there by yourself. This will be better for everyone." Brad's voice came through clearly, this time loud enough that I could hear exactly what he said. "Tell him it is for his own good. Tell him we are doing this because we love him. Brad says we are doing this because we love you and want what is best for you." I sat there in complete silence, absorbing what I was hearing. They were not just excluding me from vacations. They were not just using my money while calling me needy. They were planning to take my independence, my home, my autonomy, everything I had worked for my entire life, and lock me away somewhere convenient so they could control my assets and my existence. "Dad, are you still there?" Alicia's voice had a sharp edge of impatience. "I am here," I said quietly. "I heard everything you said, every single word. I also heard everything Brad said in the background." There was a sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone realizing they had been caught saying something they should not have said. "Enjoy the rest of your family vacation, Alicia. I hope the food in Rome is worth it." I ended the call and placed my phone face down on the table very deliberately. My hands were steady, my breathing was calm. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. They had shown me exactly what they thought of me, exactly what their plans were, exactly how far they were willing to go. Now it was time to show them what a 77-year-old man could do when he finally stopped being useful and started protecting himself. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after ending that call, phone face down on the wood surface, my hands resting flat on either side of it. My fingers were not shaking. My breathing stayed even and controlled. The panic they had tried to instill in me, the fear they had tried to create with their threats about care facilities and selling my house, None of it had landed the way they intended. I looked out the window at my front yard, the grass just starting to show its spring green, the maple tree I had planted the year we moved in now towering over the roof. 38 years I had lived in this house. 38 years of mortgage payments made on time every single month until the final payment 15 years ago when I officially owned it free and clear. The deed sat in my filing cabinet with only one name on it. James Robert Washington. Not James and Alicia. Not James and Brad. Just James. This house they thought they could sell to, warehouse me somewhere convenient. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. But the anger was still too fresh, too raw, burning in my chest like hot coals. I stood up from the table, leaving my coffee cup and phone behind, and walked with purpose into my home office. The filing cabinet stood in the corner, a sturdy metal box where I kept all my important documents organized and secure the way I had organized everything in my life for 7 decades. I opened the top drawer and reached for the file labeled Property Documents. My hand closed around the folder and I pulled it out, setting it on my desk. The overhead light cast a circle of brightness across the surface as I opened the folder and began sorting through the papers inside. My house deed was right on top, exactly where I kept it. The official document with the county seal showing clear transfer of ownership, mortgage satisfaction, everything legal and proper. James Robert Washington, sole owner of 1247 Elmwood Drive, Cedar Falls, Iowa. I had looked at this document many times over the years, each time feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. A school principal's salary was not extravagant, but I had managed it carefully, saved wisely, and paid off this house while also raising a daughter on my own. But I was not pulling out this folder to look at my own deed. My hand moved past that first document to the second one in the stack. Thicker paper, more recent, still crisp and new because it was only 6 months old. I lifted it out carefully and set it under the light where I could read every word clearly. Deed of trust and warranty. Deed, 847 Oak Avenue, Cedar Falls, Iowa. And there in the section labeled Owner and Title Holder, printed in official legal text that could not be disputed or argued with one name, appeared. James Robert Washington. Sole owner. Not Alicia Washington Zimmerman, not Brad Zimmerman, not James Washington and Alicia Washington Zimmerman as joint owners. Just my name. Only my name. Legally, officially, undeniably my property. I remembered that conversation 6 months ago like it had happened yesterday. Alicia and Brad sitting in my living room, explaining how the bank would not approve their mortgage without my help. Not just the down payment, but actually putting the house in my name for the purchase. Just temporarily, they had promised. Just to get through the approval process. Just for the mortgage approval, Daddy, Alicia had said, using that little girl voice that had always melted my resolve. We will transfer it to our names once everything goes through. The bank just needs to see stronger credit history and proof of assets. It will only be for a few weeks. But weeks had turned into months. They had been too busy to handle the paperwork, they said. Too much going on with Brad's new sales territory. Too stressed with moving into the house and getting settled. Next month, they promised. Next season. Next year, when things calmed down. There was always a reason why now was not the right time to transfer the deed into their names. I had not pushed it, had not insisted, had trusted that they would take care of it eventually, because they said they would, and I believed my daughter kept her promises. Looking at that deed, now seeing my name as sole owner of the house they thought was theirs, I smiled for the first time in days. A real smile, not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who had just realized they were holding all the cards in a game they had not known they were playing. They wanted to sell my house to put me in a care facility. How interesting. Because I could sell their house, and they would never see it coming. I set the deed down on my desk and opened the top drawer where I kept business cards from people I trusted. My fingers walked through the small stack until I found the one I was looking for. Cream-colored cardstock with burgundy lettering. Marcus Henderson, Henderson Realty, licensed real estate broker. Below that, his cell phone number and the address of his office on Main Street. Marcus and I went back 30 years to when he was a young teacher in my school and I was his principal. He had left education after 5 years to pursue real estate, said he wanted to build something for his family that did not depend on the whims of school board budgets and state funding cuts. We had stayed friends over the decades, running into each other at church, at community events, at the occasional retirement party for colleagues we had both known. He was a good man, honest, discreet, exactly the kind of person I needed right now. I grabbed my car keys and drove to his office. The trip took less than 15 minutes through familiar Cedar Falls streets. I parked in front of a renovated brick building that housed Henderson Realty on the ground floor, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Marcus glanced up from his computer as I entered, and his face broke into a wide smile of genuine pleasure. He stood up from his desk, a tall man in his late 50s with silver starting to show in his hair. "James, good to see you, brother. How is retirement treating you?" I shook his hand firmly. "I need to sell the Oak Avenue property, fast." His smile faded slightly, replaced by professional concern. "The house you bought for Alicia, is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I just need it sold. What is the market doing right now for that area?" Marcus studied my face for a moment, those sharp eyes that had made him successful in real estate picking up on things I was not saying. But he was professional enough not to push. He turned to his computer and pulled up recent comparable sales, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "Properties like that in that neighborhood," he said, scrolling through listings and sales data. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, finished basement, that square footage. We are looking at probably $285,000, maybe as high as $295,000 if we stage it right and market it well. I had paid $156,000 for that house just 6 months ago. The market had been good to property values in Cedar Falls, and that location was desirable for young families. The numbers Marcus quoted meant a potential profit of over $130,000. "How fast are we talking?" Marcus asked, leaning back in his chair. "Normal timeline, or are we in a hurry here?" "As fast as possible. Price it to move. I want offers within days if we can manage it." He nodded slowly, pulling out listing forms and inspection schedules, his movements practiced and efficient. "I can make that happen. We will need to get photos done, probably some minor staging to make it show well." "When can I get access to the property?" "The current occupants are traveling overseas. They will not be back for another week and a half. I have keys." Marcus raised an eyebrow at that, but did not comment. "I can have my photographer out there tomorrow morning. We will get this thing listed and moving before the weekend." I met his eyes directly. "Do it. Whatever it takes to sell it fast. I want this done." He extended his hand, and we shook on it, sealing the deal with the kind of trust that came from 3 decades of friendship and mutual respect. "Consider it done, James." Marcus pulled out the listing agreement and slid it across his desk toward me. Standard real estate contract, multiple pages of legal language that I read through carefully despite knowing I would sign it regardless of what it said. He waited patiently while I reviewed each section, not rushing me, respecting that this was a significant decision even if he did not know all the reasons behind it. I signed my name on the designated lines, initialed where required, and dated everything. Marcus countersigned as the listing agent and made copies for both of us. "I will start marketing this immediately," he said, tucking his copy into a folder with the property address written on the tab. "This market, especially in that neighborhood, we might have offers within 48 hours. Young families are desperate for move-in-ready homes in good school districts." "That is exactly what I want to hear." We shook hands again, and I left his office feeling lighter than I had in days. The afternoon sun was bright as I drove home, classical music playing softly on the radio, my mind already moving to the next phase of what needed to happen. Back at my house, I opened my laptop and checked my email. The notification was already waiting for me, sent from Marcus's automated system. "Property successfully listed" appeared in bold letters at the top of the message. Below that, a link to the online listing showing exterior photos Marcus must have pulled from the county assessor's database. The house looked good in those photos, well-maintained, the kind of property that would attract serious buyers quickly. I opened a new browser tab and typed in "Moving Services, Cedar Falls, Iowa." Several results appeared, large national chains with generic branding and corporate websites. I scrolled past those, looking for something more personal, more local. Near the bottom of the first page, I found what I was looking for. Deshawn's Reliable Moving. Family-owned and operated since 2011. Serving Cedar Falls and surrounding communities. The website was simple but professional, featuring photos of a smiling black man in his 40s standing in front of a moving truck, his company logo painted on the side. Reviews praised his efficiency, care with belongings, and reasonable pricing. I called the number listed. "Deshawn's moving, this is Deshawn speaking. His voice was deep and friendly, the tone of someone who genuinely enjoyed his work. "My name is James Washington. I need help moving some things tomorrow morning. It is somewhat urgent." "All right, Mr. Washington, what kind of timeline are we working with here?" "Tomorrow morning, if you can manage it. It is a whole house full of belongings." There was a brief pause, probably while he checked his schedule. "I can make that work. Where are we moving things to? New house storage unit? What are we looking at?" "Storage unit. I have not arranged that yet." "No problem," Deshawn said smoothly. "I work with secure space storage over on Elm Street regularly. Good facility, fair prices, convenient location. You want me to conference them in, and we can set everything up right now?" "That would be perfect." He put me on hold for a moment, and then a woman's voice joined the call. "This is Secure Space Storage, Angela speaking." "Angela, this is Deshawn. Got a customer here, needs a unit for a whole house worth of stuff. What do you have available?" "For a full house, you are looking at a 10 by 20 unit minimum," Angela said. I could hear her typing on a keyboard. "I have 2 available right now. First month is $145, then same rate monthly after that." "I will take 1, I said. "Perfect. I can have it ready first thing tomorrow morning. Can I get a name and phone number?" I provided my information and she processed everything quickly, giving me a unit number and gate access code. Deshawn came back on the line after she disconnected. "All set then, Mr. Washington. I will have my truck and 2 guys. We can start at 8:30 tomorrow morning. What is the address we are moving from?" 847 Oak Avenue. There was a pause longer this time. When Deshawn spoke again, his tone had shifted, slightly more careful. "The folks living there, they traveling or something?" "Something like that," I replied. Another pause and then a low chuckle. "Say no more, brother. I have been there myself. Family situations. I understand. We will be professional and quick, in and out before you know it." "I appreciate that, Deshawn." 8:30 tomorrow morning, 847 Oak Avenue. We will take good care of everything, Mr. Washington. You have my word on that." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of everything that needed to happen in the next 24 hours. Call Marcus to confirm photographer access. Meet Deshawn at the house. Supervise the move to storage. Simple steps, but each one moving me closer to a reckoning that was long overdue. My phone sat silent on the table. No more calls from Italy. No more transaction notifications. They were probably trying to figure out their next move, wondering if I would back down, assuming this was just a temporary tantrum from a hurt old man who would eventually apologize and restore their access to my money. They had no idea what was coming. Thursday evening, I was making dinner when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately, sensing from the late hour that this was important news. "James, I have got excellent news for you, brother." His voice practically vibrated with excitement. "We have a serious buyer already. Cash offer, no financing contingencies." I set down the spatula I had been holding and gave him my full attention. "That was fast. I told you this market was hot. Young couple Trevor and Monica Hayes. They just relocated here from Chicago for new jobs, both of them professionals looking for exactly what you have got. 3 bedrooms, good neighborhood, move in ready condition. They are very motivated buyers." "What are they offering?" $292,000. Cash. Full asking price. No negotiations, no inspection contingencies beyond the standard structural and pest. They want this house, James. $292,000. I had paid $156,000 just 6 months ago. Even after Marcus's commission and closing costs, I would walk away with over $120,000 profit. Money that represented not just a return on investment, but justice, compensation for years of being used. "And here is the best part," Marcus continued. "They want to close as soon as humanly possible. They are asking if we can make it happen this weekend." "This weekend?" I glanced at the calendar on my refrigerator. "Today is Thursday. You mean close in 3 days?" I know it sounds crazy, but they are month to month in a corporate apartment right now. Their lease is flexible so they can move whenever. They have cash sitting in their account, ready to wire transfer. No mortgage approval process to wait for no appraisals that could slow things down. If we can get the title work done and the paperwork processed, they are ready to sign on Saturday. Alicia and Brad would still be in Italy on Saturday. They would not even know their house had been sold until they returned home to find it was no longer theirs. The timing was almost too perfect. "Make it happen," I said. "You are sure this is moving very fast?" Most sellers like a little more time to process everything. I am absolutely certain. How quickly can you have the documents ready? I can have everything prepared by tomorrow afternoon. We will need to coordinate with the title company, get them moving on the search and insurance. If everyone does their part, we can absolutely close on Saturday morning. Then do it. Whatever you need from me, whenever you need it, I will be available. This is my top priority. All right then. I could hear him typing, probably sending emails and making notes even as we spoke. I will call the title company first thing tomorrow morning, get them expediting everything. The Hayes family is going to be thrilled. They have been searching for months and losing out on other properties to competing offers. They sound like good people. I am glad the house is going to a family who will appreciate it. They really are. Young, hardworking, excited to put down roots here in Cedar Falls. Exactly the kind of folks that neighborhood needs. We finalized a few more details and confirmed timing for the closing on Saturday morning at 9. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen with the phone still in my hand, feeling something I had not felt in a very long time. Vindication. The sweet taste of watching a plan come together exactly as it should. Friday morning arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and mild temperatures that made the work ahead seem almost pleasant. I drove to 847 Oak Avenue at 8:15, pulling up to find Deshawn's truck already parked in the driveway, engine idling exhaust, creating small clouds in the cool morning air. Deshawn stepped out of the cab when he saw me arrive, a solidly built man in his mid-40s wearing work clothes and a company shirt with his logo embroidered on the chest. Two younger men emerged from the passenger side, both wearing matching shirts. Deshawn introduced them as Jerome and Malik, his regular crew. "Morning, Mr. Washington," Deshawn said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "We ready to do this?" I pulled the spare key from my pocket, the same key I had kept since helping them move in 6 months ago. "Let me show you what we are dealing with." I unlocked the front door and we stepped inside. The house smelled like them, a mixture of Brad's cologne and Alicia's perfume. Familiar scents that had once meant family and now just meant betrayal. I led them through each room, pointing out what needed to be moved, which was essentially everything. The living room held the expensive sectional sofa I had bought them last Christmas, a cream-colored leather monstrosity that cost $4,000 because Alicia said it was exactly what she had always dreamed of owning. Brad's gaming setup dominated one corner, thousands of dollars worth of equipment for playing video games while his wife was at work. Two massive televisions mounted on the walls, end tables and lamps and decorative items that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. "We will start in the bedrooms, work our way out," Deshawn said, already mentally organizing the job. "Jerome, you and Malik get the boxes and packing materials. Let us do this systematic." The crew began working with impressive efficiency, wrapping and boxing and labeling with the practiced movements of professionals who had done this hundreds of times. I watched for a few minutes and then picked up an empty box intending to help. "Mr. Washington, I appreciate the offer, but insurance regulations," Deshawn started to say. "I am not that old," I interrupted. "And this is personal. I need to be part of this." He studied my face for a moment and then nodded. "All right then, just be careful with your back." Jerome and Malik grinned but said nothing. I grabbed a marker and started labeling boxes as I filled them. Alicia's books, Brad's sports memorabilia, kitchen items. Each box represented pieces of their life that I had funded, supported, enabled. In the primary bedroom closet, I found their wedding albums on a high shelf. I pulled one down and flipped through the pages, seeing what I had been too emotional to notice on the actual wedding day. Page after page of Brad's family. Richard and Patricia in formal wear, smiling at the camera from every angle. Brad's siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles filling the frames. And me when I appeared at all pushed to the edges or partially cut off, present but not really part of the celebration. 2 photos out of hundreds included me in any meaningful way. I closed the album and handed it to Malik. "Box this up with the others." In Brad's nightstand, I found credit card statements he had apparently forgotten about. I flipped through them, seeing charges at expensive restaurants and bars and golf courses during the same months they had come to me crying about not being able to make their car payment. $500 at a steakhouse on the same week they asked me to cover their electric bill. $300 at a sporting goods store the day before they said they could not afford groceries. Room by room, we cleared out the evidence of their lifestyle. The designer clothes filling Alicia's 2 walk-in closets, price tags still attached to some items she had apparently never worn. Brad's collection of expensive whiskeys in the Den bottles costing hundreds of dollars each. Furniture and electronics and decorations, so many things I had either bought directly or funded indirectly through my support. My back started aching around 11 o'clock, the muscles protesting the unfamiliar physical labor. But I kept working, powered by something deeper than physical strength. Purpose. Justice. The satisfaction of taking action after years of passive acceptance. In what was obviously intended as a future nursery, I found baby furniture still in boxes, never assembled, gathering dust. A crib, a changing table, a rocking chair. They had talked about having children someday, grandchildren I had looked forward to spoiling and loving, but apparently someday never came, and these boxes just sat here as symbols of futures that never materialized. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was I being too cruel? This was everything they owned, their entire life packed into boxes and headed for a storage unit. Was this punishment too harsh for what they had done? Then Jerome carried past me another box, and I saw Brad's credit card statement sitting on top. Luxury spending while claiming poverty, using me as their personal bank while calling me needy and demanding, planning to sell my house and warehouse me in a facility to get me out of their way. The doubt vanished completely. By 12:30 in the afternoon, we were done. The house stood completely empty, every room cleared of furniture and belongings. Sunlight streamed through bare windows onto floors that showed the outlines of where rugs had been, where furniture had sat. The echo of our footsteps sounded different in the empty space, hollow and final. I did a final walk through, checking each room to make sure we had not missed anything. Closets empty, cabinets bare. Garage cleared. This house that had been full of their life now held nothing but air and light and the ghosts of what used to be. I locked the door, tested it to make sure it was secure, and pocketed the keys. They would not be getting these back. The new owners would receive fresh keys at closing tomorrow morning. We caravanned to secure space storage, Deshawn's truck leading the way with me following in my car. At the facility, I watched as they unloaded everything into Unit 18D, stacking boxes and furniture with care despite the circumstances. When the last item was placed and Deshawn rolled down the metal door and secured the padlock, I felt a sense of completion that was almost spiritual. I paid Deshawn in cash, adding a $200 tip split between the three of them. "Hope things work out for you, Mr. Washington," Deshawn said as we shook hands one final time. "Whatever you are going through, I have got a feeling you are going to come out the other side just fine." "I appreciate that, Deshawn, I really do." I drove home slowly, taking my time in no particular hurry. Everything was falling into place exactly as it should. Saturday morning came with the kind of clarity that felt symbolic, as if the universe itself was endorsing what I was about to do. I dressed carefully in a pressed shirt and slacks, the same outfit I used to wear for important parent-teacher conferences when I needed to project authority and calm competence. This closing was just as important as any of those meetings, maybe more so. The title office was located in a professional building downtown, the kind of place where life-changing transactions happened every day in bland conference rooms with too much fluorescent lighting. I arrived 10 minutes early, parking in the visitor lot and taking a moment to center myself before walking inside. Marcus was already there, standing in the lobby with a couple I immediately recognized from their photo on the online offer. Trevor and Monica Hayes looked to be in their early 30s, both dressed professionally but casually, their faces showing the kind of optimistic excitement that comes with buying your first really nice home. Trevor was tall and lean, wearing glasses and a button-down shirt. Monica had her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her smile warm and genuine. "James," Marcus called out, waving me over. "Come meet the Hayes family." We shook hands, all around their grips firm and confident. Young professionals who had worked hard and saved carefully and were now making the biggest purchase of their lives. I felt a momentary pang of something that might have been guilt, wondering if I should tell them the complicated story behind this sale, but pushed it away. This was a legitimate transaction. The house was mine to sell. What happened after was not their concern. "Mr. Washington, we are so excited about this house," Monica said, her eyes bright. "We have been searching for months and kept losing out on other properties. When Marcus told us about this one, we knew immediately it was perfect. The location is ideal for both our commutes," Trevor added. "And the school district is excellent. We are planning to start a family soon, so that was a major factor." A family. Children playing in that yard, birthday parties and homework at the kitchen table, and all the normal chaos of raising kids. Everything Alicia and Brad had said they wanted, but never quite got around to starting. Maybe this house would be luckier for the Hayes family than it had been for my daughter. We especially love what you did with the landscaping, Monica continued. That maple tree in the front yard is gorgeous and the flower beds are so well maintained. You clearly took great care of the property. I opened my mouth to explain that I had not actually done any of that work, that the yard was Alicia and Brad's doing, one of the few things they had actually taken care of themselves. But then I stopped. What was the point? Let them think what they wanted to think. The truth was too complicated and too painful to explain to strangers. Thank you, I said simply. I am glad it will be going to people who appreciate it. The closing agent called us into the conference room, and we all took seats around a large table covered with documents. Stacks of paperwork that represented the legal transfer of property, the exchange of money, the official end of one chapter and beginning of another. I had been through this process before when I bought my own house decades ago, but it felt different this time, more final, more significant. The agent walked us through each document, explaining what we were signing, where to initial, where to date. Trevor and Monica signed first, their hands sometimes trembling slightly with the enormousness of what they were doing. Then it was my turn. I read each page carefully before signing, making sure everything was exactly as it should be, leaving no room for future disputes or claims. Seller disclosure forms, deed transfer documents, settlement statements showing the breakdown of costs and fees. Page after page of legal language that all added up to one simple truth. This house was no longer mine. And more importantly, it was no longer Alicia and Brad's either. My phone buzzed in my pocket partway through the signing. I ignored it, keeping my focus on the documents in front of me. It buzzed again a minute later, and then a third time. Probably spam calls or appointment reminders. Nothing that could not wait. When all the signatures were complete, the closing agent processed the final transfer. Wire transfer should hit your account within the next few minutes, she told me. You will receive a confirmation text when it processes. We stood and shook hands again. Trevor and Monica were beaming, practically glowing with happiness. The closing agent handed them a folder with copies of all the documents and a set of keys to their new home. We can actually move in starting tomorrow morning, Trevor said, looking at the keys in his hand like they were made of gold. Our stuff is already packed and in a pod. We have been ready to go for weeks. Tomorrow morning, Sunday, Alicia and Brad would still be in Rome, probably posting more photos of their wonderful family vacation, completely unaware that their house had been sold out from under them and all their belongings were sitting in a storage unit. My phone buzzed again, this time with the text I had been waiting for. Bank transfer complete. I opened my banking app discreetly and checked the balance. $292,000 minus closing costs, and Marcus's commission came to just over $126,000 in profit. I had turned a fatherly gesture, a supposedly generous gift, to help my daughter achieve her dreams into a six-figure business transaction. The math was cold and clean and satisfying in a way that emotional appeals to family loyalty could never be. I drove home from the title office feeling a sense of accomplishment I had not experienced in years. The leather of my steering wheel felt different somehow, like even familiar objects had changed meaning now that I had finally taken control of my own life. The sun was high and bright, making the ordinary streets of Cedar Falls look almost beautiful. When I pulled into my driveway, I grabbed my phone from the cup holder and noticed several notifications lighting up the screen. Most were text confirmations from the bank and title company official records of the transaction that had just taken place. But one notification stood out. Facebook. 3 new interactions on posts I was tagged in or connected to. I unlocked my phone and opened the app, curious despite knowing I probably should not care what was happening on social media while my daughter was still overseas and unaware her life had just changed dramatically. The notification took me directly to Alicia's profile, where she had posted a status update 2 hours ago. Some people have no respect for family privacy. The text was accompanied by an angry face emoji, red and fuming. Below her post, a stream of comments from her friends and acquaintances, all expressing concern and support for whatever vague drama she was implying. Oh no, what happened? You okay, hun? DM me if you need to talk. Family can be so difficult. Sending you love. Some people just don't understand boundaries. Alicia had responded to a few of them with equally vague statements. Just dealing with some family issues, nothing I want to get into publicly, but appreciate the support. Some people think they can control others through money. Learning who really cares about me versus who just wants to manipulate. She was playing the victim perfectly, setting up the narrative before I even had a chance to tell my side of the story. Not that I planned to tell my side publicly. This was not a social media drama to be played out for entertainment. This was real life with real consequences, and I had no intention of reducing it to Facebook posts and comment wars. I closed the app without liking, commenting, or reacting in any way. Let her say whatever she wanted to say. Let her friends offer whatever sympathy they wanted to offer based on incomplete information and one-sided stories. None of it mattered. None of it changed what I had done or why I had done it. The house closing was complete. Their belongings were in storage. The new owners would be moving in tomorrow morning. These were facts, solid and unchangeable, not subject to public opinion or social media spin. I had more important things to focus on than Facebook drama. Saturday morning, I woke with a strange impulse to drive past the Oak Avenue property one last time, not because I needed to check on anything or verify the closing had happened. The bank transfer sitting in my account confirmed everything was legal and final. But there was something about seeing the house transition to its new owners that felt important, like witnessing the last page of a chapter I had been writing for 6 months. I made coffee, took my time with breakfast, and then drove across town through familiar streets that held decades of memories. It was 10:30 when I turned onto Oak Avenue and immediately saw what I had come to see. A large U-Haul truck sat in the driveway, its back door rolled up the loading ramp extended down to the pavement. Trevor and Monica were there, both wearing jeans and comfortable shirts, directing a crew of professional movers who were carrying furniture and boxes into the house. I watched as two men carefully maneuvered a white baby crib through the front door, Monica calling out instructions about which room it should go in. A young family starting fresh in a house that represented hope and possibility for them, completely unaware of the complicated history that had led to this moment. I parked across the street far enough away that I would not seem like I was intruding, but close enough to observe. This was not my house anymore, not my business. But I could not quite bring myself to leave yet. Monica had moved to the front flower beds and was kneeling in the dirt, planting something colorful that would probably bloom beautifully in a few weeks. Trevor was in the backyard, visible through the side gate, assembling what looked like a swing set for the children they planned to have. Normal family activities, normal dreams being built one small action at a time. My phone rang the distinctive tone that indicated an international call. I looked at the screen and saw a number I did not recognize but knew had to be from Italy. My finger hovered over the answer button for just a moment before I pressed it. "Hello?" "Mr. Washington, this is Patricia Zimmerman, Brad's mother." Her voice was tight and controlled, the tone of someone trying very hard to maintain composure. "I am calling because there seems to be some sort of terrible confusion and—" That was when the taxi pulled up to the house. The timing was so perfect it almost felt orchestrated by a force beyond my control. As Patricia continued talking in my ear about confusion and misunderstandings, and surely there must be some explanation, I watched a yellow taxi roll to a stop directly in front of 847 Oak Avenue. The back doors opened, and Alicia stepped out first. She looked exactly like someone who had just endured a transatlantic flight. Her hair was pulled back messily, her clothes rumpled, dark circles visible under her eyes even from across the street. But the exhaustion vanished the instant she registered the scene in front of her. Her eyes sharpened. Her posture straightened, her entire body going on high alert. Brad emerged from the other side of the taxi, leaning back in to pay the driver. His face showed confusion. First his eyes moving from the U-Haul truck to Monica, kneeling in the flower bed, to Trevor, visible in the backyard. Confusion shifted rapidly to concern, and then to something darker. Alarm. Maybe the first whisper of fear. "Excuse me," Brad called out, his voice carrying across the yard with an aggressive edge. "What are you people doing at our house?" Monica looked up from her gardening, her expression friendly but puzzled. She had dirt on her hands and knees, clearly comfortable with her new property, completely unprepared for whatever confrontation was about to unfold. Trevor appeared in the doorway, still holding the papers from yesterday's closing, probably reviewing the move-in checklist or something equally mundane. "Your house," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding here." I ended the call with Patricia without saying goodbye, cutting her off mid-sentence about how surely I could explain what was happening. Then I opened my car door and stepped out, walking steadily across the street toward the scene that was developing with the inevitability of a storm that had been building for days. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope I had prepared, the one containing the storage unit information and keys. My footsteps on the pavement were measured and deliberate, the walk of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and why. Alicia saw me. Her eyes found me crossing the street, and I watched her face transform in real time. Confusion at my presence. Recognition that my being here could not be coincidence. And then realization hitting her like cold water, her eyes going wide, her mouth opening slightly. The rage came last, flooding into her features and turning them hard and sharp. "Dad!" Her voice could have cut through steel. "What the hell is going on here? Why are there complete strangers moving into our house?" Trevor and Monica exchanged worried glances, clearly sensing they had stepped into the middle of something much more complicated than a simple property transaction. Monica was still kneeling in the dirt, but I noticed she had not let go of her gardening trowel, holding it now in a way that suggested she might use it if this situation escalated to violence. Brad turned his attention to Trevor, stepping forward with the kind of aggressive body language that was meant to intimidate. "Sir, I do not know who you think you are or what you think you are doing here, but you need to pack up all your things and get out. Right now. This is private property and you are trespassing." Trevor remained calm, raising the papers in his hand so Brad could see them clearly. "I am not trespassing. I have the deed right here. We closed on this property yesterday morning. My wife and I are the legal owners of this house." "That is completely impossible," Brad said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "This house belongs to us. We have lived here for 6 months. All our things are inside. This is our home." "Actually," Trevor said quietly, "we moved all the furniture out on Friday. The house was completely empty when we arrived this morning." Monica stood up slowly, still holding that trowel, her voice quiet but absolutely firm. "Maybe we should call the police and let them sort this out." The taxi driver, who had been watching this entire exchange with increasing concern, put his car in gear and pulled away from the curb quickly, clearly wanting no part of whatever drama was unfolding. Brad and Alicia's luggage sat on the sidewalk where the driver had placed it. Expensive Italian leather suitcases that represented the vacation they had taken while excluding me the family time they had enjoyed while spending my money. "Dad." Alicia turned to face me fully, her voice shaking with fury but also with something else. Fear, maybe. The dawning understanding that this was not a misunderstanding or a mistake. "What did you do?" I stepped forward calmly, my hand still holding the envelope. "I sold the house. It was my property to sell." I stepped forward with the calm authority that came from 4 decades of managing difficult situations as a school principal. Angry parents, defiant students, heated school board meetings. I had navigated countless confrontations with nothing but steady composure and the quiet power of someone who knew they were in the right. This was no different. "That will not be necessary," I said to Monica, my voice carrying clearly across the yard. "There is no need to involve the police." Alicia whirled on me, her exhaustion from the flight completely forgotten now, replaced by pure adrenaline-fueled rage. "Dad, you need to fix this situation right now. I do not know what kind of mistake happened here, but you need to make it right immediately." I turned first to Trevor and Monica, wanting to address the innocent parties before dealing with my daughter and her husband. "I sincerely apologize for this confusion and disruption on what should be a happy day for you. Please go ahead and continue moving into your home. This does not concern you." Then I pivoted to face Alicia and Brad directly, my voice remaining steady and matter-of-fact, as if I was explaining a simple administrative policy rather than delivering news that would shatter their entire world. The house was sold because it belonged to me, not to you, not to both of us, just me. Brad's face already flushed from the long flight, and the shock of the situation turned a deeper shade of red. "What do you mean it belonged to you? This is our house, we live here." "Check the original deed from the purchase 6 months ago," I said calmly. "You will find that it was never transferred into your names. I am listed as the sole owner. I have been the legal owner since the day we closed on the property." Alicia's voice rose to a pitch that made the neighbor's dog start barking somewhere down the street. "You cannot just sell our home out from under us like this. This is where we live. This is our life." "I can absolutely sell my own property," I replied, keeping my tone even and reasonable. "Which is exactly what I did. The closing happened yesterday morning. These nice people paid cash for the house. Everything is legal, proper, and final. Brad took a step toward me, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. This is theft. This is fraud. We are going to sue you for everything you have. We will take you to court, and we will destroy you. I looked at him with something that might have been pity if I had any left to spare. With what money are you planning to hire a lawyer, Brad? Your credit cards were declined at that restaurant in Rome, remember? The emergency card I had given Alicia for actual emergencies, not luxury vacations, I was not invited to. Trevor whispered something to Monica, and they both began backing toward their front door, clearly wanting to escape this family drama that had nothing to do with them. Monica still held her gardening trowel in one hand, her other hand finding Trevor's arm. We will just be inside, Monica said quietly, her voice apologetic. Let you all work this out privately. Please do, I said to them, offering a small smile. Enjoy your new home. I promise this does not concern you at all. They disappeared through the doorway, quickly leaving the three of us standing in the front yard with Alicia and Brad's expensive luggage scattered on the sidewalk like evidence at a crime scene. Alicia's voice changed, taking on a desperate, frantic quality that reminded me of when she was a little girl and did not get her way. Dad, where are we supposed to live? What did you do with all our things, our furniture, our clothes, everything we own? I held out the envelope I had been carrying in my jacket pocket. Brad lunged forward and snatched it from my hand, his fingers trembling as he tore it open with more force than necessary. He pulled out the single sheet of paper inside and read it aloud, his voice shaking with disbelief. Secure Space Storage, Unit 18D, Elm Street. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Storage. Storage. Alicia echoed, her voice cracking. You put our entire life into a storage unit. Everything was moved very carefully on Friday morning, I explained calmly. Professional movers packed and transported all your belongings. Nothing was damaged or lost. Everything you own is secure in that unit. The first month's rent has been paid in full. Brad crumpled the paper in his fist, his whole body shaking now with rage or shock or some combination of both. This is insane. You cannot do something like this to family. This is beyond cruel. This is unforgivable. Real family does not exclude their own father from family vacations while calling him needy and demanding, I said quietly. Real family does not threaten to sell their father's house and put him in a care facility because he set a boundary. Real family does not use emergency credit cards for luxury Roman lunches while the person who gave them that card sits at home processing their betrayal. That is completely different, and you know it, Brad shouted, spittle flying from his mouth. Is it? I asked, genuinely curious what twisted logic would make his behavior acceptable and mine unforgivable. Please explain to me how it is different. Brad stepped closer to me, using his height and physical presence to try to intimidate me the way bullies have been doing since the beginning of time. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot and angry. We are going to fight this in court. We are going to challenge everything you did. We will prove you were not of sound mind, that you were manipulated, that this entire sale was illegal. We will get that house back, and we will make sure you never have the opportunity to hurt us like this again. I did not step back, did not flinch. 40 years of dealing with aggressive teenagers and their angry parents had taught me that backing down only encouraged bullies to push harder. The sale is completely legal and above board. The property was mine from the very beginning. I had every right to sell it. No court in this country will overturn a legitimate real estate transaction just because the seller's daughter is upset about it. Alicia's voice changed again, shifting to that manipulative tone she had perfected since childhood, the little girl voice that used to work on me every single time. Daddy, how could you possibly be this cruel to your own daughter? I am your little girl, your only child. How could you hurt me like this? I looked at her for a long moment, really studying her face. The face I had kissed goodnight 1,000 times. The face I had watched light up on Christmas mornings and graduation days. The face that had cried on my shoulder when her mother died, and I had promised I would always be there for her no matter what. How could you do what you did to your own father? I asked quietly. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in this entire confrontation, she had no quick answer, no manipulation, no defense. Monica appeared in the doorway again, her expression showing genuine concern that extended beyond just wanting the drama to leave her property. "Is everything going to be okay out here? Do you need anything?" I turned to her and smiled a real smile this time. "Everything is perfectly fine. I hope you and your husband enjoy your beautiful new home. It is a wonderful house in a great neighborhood. You will be very happy here." Behind me, I heard Alicia make a small sound that might have been a sob or might have been rage choking off her ability to speak. Brad and Alicia were left standing there on the sidewalk, their fancy Italian leather luggage at their feet, looking exactly like lost tourists who had somehow wandered into the wrong person's life story and could not figure out how to find their way back. I walked toward my car with deliberate, measured steps, my old work boots making solid contact with the pavement beneath my feet. Each step felt like a declaration of independence, a physical manifestation of the boundaries I was finally setting after decades of letting them walk all over me. "This is not over, old man," Brad shouted at my back, his voice carrying down the quiet suburban street where neighbors were probably watching from behind their curtains. "You hear me? This is not over." I reached my car and opened the door, sliding into the familiar driver's seat. The key turned smoothly in the ignition, and my classical music station picked up exactly where it had left off when I had parked some Mozart piece that felt appropriate for the moment. I looked at Brad through my open car window and said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear, "Yes, it is." Then I put the car in gear and drove away at a normal, responsible speed, not rushing, not fleeing, just leaving because I had said everything that needed to be said and there was nothing more to discuss. In my rearview mirror, I could see them still standing on that curb, completely shell-shocked, their luggage scattered around them like the remnants of a life that had just exploded. Alicia had her hands covering her face. Brad was staring after my car with an expression of pure disbelief. They looked small and lost and utterly unprepared for the consequences of their own actions. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt no guilt about causing someone else pain. Only a deep, satisfying sense that justice had finally been served. Sunday morning, I did what I had done almost every Sunday for the past 40 years. I put on my best suit, drove to Mount Zion Baptist Church on the east side of Cedar Falls, and took my usual seat in the third pew from the front. The familiar rituals of greeting old friends, singing hymns from memory, and listening to Pastor Williams preach were a comfort I needed more than I had realized. After the service ended, I was making my way slowly toward the exit when Pastor Williams intercepted me in the fellowship hall. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of wisdom that came from decades of counseling his congregation through every imaginable crisis. "James," he said quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder, "heard about the situation with Alicia and Brad. How are you holding up, brother? Word traveled fast in our community. I should have expected that. Better than I expected, Pastor. Better than I probably deserved to feel." He studied my face with those sharp, knowing eyes. "Sometimes the hardest thing a parent has to do is let their children experience the consequences of their own choices. That does not make you a bad father. That makes you wise." Before I could respond, Sister Dorothy approached a woman who had known me since I first started attending Mount Zion 35 years ago. She had watched Alicia grow up in this church, had taught her Sunday school, had been at her baptism. "James Washington," she said, her voice firm and maternal. "That boy Brad never treated you the way he should have. We all saw it, even if you did not want to see it yourself. You did what you needed to do." Brother Antoine joined us, a retired postal worker who had been one of my closest friends for decades. "You worked hard your whole life, James. Built yourself up from nothing, became a principal, raised your daughter right after losing Dorothy. You deserve better than being treated like an ATM machine. Everybody in this church knows that." Their support meant more than I could express, but I also noticed some members of the congregation keeping their distance, their expressions showing disapproval or discomfort with the situation. Mrs. Henderson, who had been friends with Dorothy, gave me a tight smile but did not approach. Deacon Foster nodded politely, but moved quickly past without stopping to talk. Monday morning, I stopped at the Cedar Falls Coffee House for my usual morning coffee. The place was busy with the weekday crowd, people grabbing drinks before work, reading newspapers, tapping on laptops. I found a seat near the window and opened the local paper. 2 tables over, I could not help but overhear a conversation between 3 women who clearly did not realize I was within earshot. "Did you hear about James Washington selling his daughter's house while she was on vacation?" "I heard. Honestly, I always thought that son-in-law of his seemed entitled, the way he acted at community events like he was too good for Cedar Falls." James Washington worked his whole life. My kids went to his school. He was a good principal, fair to everyone. Built himself up from nothing. If he did what he did, he must have had good reason. But not everyone agreed. At the table behind me, an older man's voice carried clearly. Family should stick together no matter what. My grandfather used to say blood is thicker than water. You do not just abandon your own daughter like that, no matter what she did. His companion responded, I do not know the whole story, but putting someone's things in storage while they are overseas seems cruel to me. There had to be a better way to handle it. I sipped my coffee and focused on my newspaper, letting their opinions wash over me without sinking in. I had spent 77 years worrying too much about what other people thought, trying to be the good guy, the generous father, the helpful friend. Now I was learning the valuable lesson of letting other people's judgments roll off my back like water off a duck's feathers. Later that afternoon, I ran into Marcus at the hardware store where I was picking up some materials to fix a loose board on my back porch. He was looking at paint samples, probably for one of his real estate listings. James, he walked over, genuine warmth in his face. How are you holding up after everything? Better than I ever expected to feel, I said honestly. Lighter, somehow. Like I put down a weight I had been carrying for too long. He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the best thing we can do for people is stop enabling them to treat us badly. You taught that girl a lesson she needed to learn. Whether she learns it or not, that is up to her now. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. The sale, the discretion, all of it. That is what friends are for, brother. That is what friends are for. 3 months passed with surprising quietness. Spring turned into early summer, the Iowa weather warming up nicely, my garden blooming with the vegetables I had planted in April. I settled into a comfortable routine of retirement activities, morning coffee on my back porch, afternoons working on home improvement projects I had been putting off for years, evenings reading books I had never had time for when I was working. On a Tuesday morning in late June, my doorbell rang just as I was finishing breakfast. I opened the door to find a young man in business casual attire holding a clipboard and an official-looking envelope. James Robert Washington. That is me. You have been served. He handed me the envelope, had me sign his clipboard confirming receipt, and walked quickly back to his car before I could ask any questions. Not that I needed to ask. I knew exactly what this was. I carried the envelope inside, set it on my kitchen table, and poured myself another cup of coffee before opening it. No need to rush. Whatever was inside had been inevitable from the moment I sold that house. The legal documents were thick and formal, printed on heavy paper with official court seals. Alicia Washington Zimmerman and Bradford James Zimmerman versus James Robert Washington. Civil lawsuit alleging fraud, elder manipulation, improper property transfer, and a list of other claims that all boiled down to the same basic complaint. They wanted the house back or financial compensation equivalent to its value. I read through the entire filing, carefully noting their arguments. They claimed I had manipulated them into putting the house solely in my name under false pretenses. They argued I had taken advantage of my position as Alicia's father to convince them to trust me with the deed. They painted themselves as innocent victims of a cruel elderly man who had become mentally unstable and vindictive. I was not surprised by any of it. In fact, I had been expecting this lawsuit since the day I sold the property. What did surprise me was how little I felt while reading their accusations. No anger, no hurt, no guilt, just a calm sense of certainty that they would lose. That afternoon, I received a call from my attorney, a sharp woman named Catherine Mills, who I had hired shortly after the house sale specifically to handle any legal fallout. Her voice was professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. James, I have news about the lawsuit. The judge issued his ruling this morning. That was fast. It was open and shut. Lawsuit dismissed. The judge was very thorough in his written decision. He ruled that as the sole legal owner of the property, you had every right to sell it. He found no evidence of fraud, manipulation, or improper conduct. In fact, he was fairly unsympathetic to their claims, given that they had been living in a house they did not legally own for 6 months without transferring the deed as they had apparently promised to do. What about their attorney fees? They are liable for their own costs. The judge denied their request to have you cover their legal expenses. Given that they hired a fairly expensive firm out of Des Moines, I would estimate they are looking at about $30,000 to $35,000 in fees. Can they appeal? Technically, yes, but they have no grounds. This was a clean victory, James. The law was entirely on your side from the beginning. After we hung up, I sat quietly in my living room for a few minutes, letting the news settle. 3 months of waiting, and it was over just like that. Dismissed, done, final. The local newspaper ran a small article the next day. Family property dispute resolved appeared as a tiny headline buried on page 7. The article was brief and factual, stating simply that a civil lawsuit regarding property ownership had been dismissed by the county court. No names mentioned, just a dry recitation of legal proceedings that meant nothing to anyone except the people directly involved. I filed all the paperwork in a folder I labeled Legal Victory and placed it in my filing cabinet next to the deed to my own house. Then I moved on with my day like any other, because that is exactly what it was. Just another day in a life that was finally truly my own. 2 weeks after the court dismissed their lawsuit, my phone rang on a Thursday evening while I was reading on my back porch. The caller ID showed Alicia's name, the first time she had tried to contact me directly since that disastrous confrontation at the house 3.5 months ago. I stared at the screen through 3 full rings, debating whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. On the 4th ring, I pressed accept. "Dad!" Her voice sounded completely different than the last time we had spoken. No anger, no demands, no manipulation, just exhaustion and defeat. "Alicia." A long silence stretched between us, filled with everything we had said and everything we had not said over the past months. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her gathering courage to continue. "The lawyer fees," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They came to $32,000. We do not have it. Brad lost his job last month. The sales territory eliminated his position. We have been trying to find work, but everything is taking so long," and she stopped, and I stayed silent, not offering to help, not offering sympathy, just listening. "We are staying with Richard and Patricia," she continued, "in their basement. They converted it into an apartment for us. It is humiliating, Dad. Brad's parents having to take us in like we are children who cannot take care of themselves." "I see," I said neutrally. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion that sounded genuine for the first time in years. "Were we really that terrible to you? Were we really so awful that you had to do this?" I thought about that question for a long moment, considering how to answer honestly without being cruel just for the sake of cruelty. A memory surfaced clear and sharp despite the years that had passed. "Do you remember your mother's funeral?" I asked. "What you?" Confusion in her voice. "What does that have to do with—" "Just answer the question. Do you remember it?" "Of course I remember it. How could I forget? You were 27 years old. I was 62. After the service ended, everyone came back to the house. Friends, family, people from church, all offering condolences and bringing food and trying to say the right things. Eventually they all left, every single one of them. But you stayed." She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. "I remember. You sat with me in the living room for 2 hours. Did not say anything. Did not try to make it better with empty words. You just held my hand and stayed. When I finally was able to cry, you cried with me. That was the moment I knew, truly knew, that I had raised you right. That despite losing your mother, you had grown into a woman of compassion and strength. Daddy." Her voice broke completely on that word. "That is the daughter I raised, Alicia. That is the woman I thought I was helping when I co-signed your mortgage and paid for your wedding and covered your bills. The woman who showed up in Rome with Brad's parents, spending my money while calling me needy and threatening to put me in a care facility. I do not know her. I do not recognize her at all." She was sobbing now, full-body sobs that I could hear through the phone connection. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Daddy. I do not know what happened to me. I do not know when I became that person. Brad, I let him convince me that—" "You let him," I said quietly. "You made choices. You chose to exclude me from that trip. You chose to spend my money while I was not there. You chose to threaten me instead of thanking me for setting a boundary. I know, and I hate myself for it. I know you are sorry, baby girl. I can hear it in your voice, and I believe you mean it. But sorry does not fix this. Sorry does not undo what was done or unsay what was said. Is there—" she hiccuped, trying to control her crying enough to speak clearly. "Is there any way we could we try to—" "You made choices," I interrupted gently. Choices have consequences. You are learning that now. Maybe that is the most important lesson I could have taught you, even if it came 30 years too late. I love you, Dad. Her voice was small and broken, the voice of the little girl she used to be before life and marriage and bad influences changed her. Tears filled my own eyes for the first time since this entire situation had started. I love you too, Alicia. I will always love you, but I love myself more now. That is something I should have learned years ago, something I wish I had taught you by example instead of having to learn it at 77. I ended the call before she could respond, before my resolve could weaken, before the sound of her crying could convince me to forgive too easily what should not be forgiven easily at all. I sat on my back porch for a long time after that phone resting in my lap, tears running down my face as the sun set and the evening grew dark around me. This was not a pure victory. This was not simple justice without cost. This hurt. It hurt terribly. But it was the right kind of hurt. The kind that came from finally setting boundaries, instead of the kind that came from continuing to let someone walk all over you while calling it love. The following week, on a Tuesday afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements. My name and address were written in handwriting. I recognized immediately, even though I had not seen it in months, Brad's handwriting distinctive with its sharp angles and compressed letters. I carried it inside along with the rest of my mail and set it on the kitchen table while I made coffee. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened to refuse whatever apology or excuse or justification it contained. But curiosity won out the way it usually does. I picked it up, slid my finger under the flap, and pulled out the contents. A check fell onto the table. I picked it up and looked at the amount. $143.00. The exact amount Alicia had charged at that boutique in Rome, Elegant Styles. Roma, the purchase that had been the final straw before I revoked her card access. The check was drawn on a bank account I did not recognize, presumably one they had opened after losing access to mine. Tucked behind the check was a small piece of notepaper, the kind that comes in cheap packs from office supply stores. Brad's handwriting again, just a few words written in what looked like black pen. From our own money this time, I am sorry. That was it. No explanation of what he was sorry for, specifically. No elaborate apology or request for forgiveness. No attempt to justify their behavior or minimize what they had done. Just those 7 words and a check that represented a fraction of what they had taken from me over the years, both financially and emotionally. I sat at my kitchen table holding that check and that note for a long time, coffee growing cold in its mug beside me. $143 would not change my life. It would not undo the betrayal or erase the hurt or make up for the years of being used and manipulated. It was a tiny gesture in the face of enormous damage, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was Brad admitting in his own limited way that they had been wrong, that they had used money that was not theirs for luxuries they had not earned while treating me with disrespect and cruelty. I thought about cashing it, depositing it into my account where it would disappear into the larger balance and mean nothing. I thought about tearing it up, rejecting even this small attempt at making amends. Instead, I did something else entirely. I walked to my home office and found my bulletin board, the cork surface where I pinned important reminders and documents I needed to reference frequently. I pinned the check there right in the center where I would see it every time I sat at my desk. Not as a trophy, not as evidence of victory, but as a reminder. Some apologies come too late to change anything, too late to rebuild what was broken or restore what was lost. But they still matter. They still mean something. They are the small signs that maybe the person who hurt you has learned something from the consequences of their actions. The check stayed pinned to that board, uncashed, a physical representation of a lesson learned the hardest way possible. The afternoon after Brad's letter arrived, I found myself driving past the Cedar Falls Pet Adoption Center, a small storefront operation I had noticed months ago, but never had reason to visit. Something made me pull into the parking lot that day. Maybe it was the weight of too many emotions sitting heavy in my chest. Maybe it was the realization that my house had been quiet for too long. Maybe it was just time. A bell chimed when I opened the door. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled, the kind of genuine smile that comes from people who spend their days around animals and have learned that simple joy. Behind her, I could hear barking and the sound of paws scratching on linoleum. "Can I help you find someone today?" she asked. "Just looking." I said not sure what I was looking for, but knowing I would recognize it when I saw it. She led me to the back room where several dogs were housed in clean, spacious kennels. Large breeds, mostly the kinds of dogs that were harder to place because people preferred puppies or smaller animals that fit better in apartments. My eyes moved across them. German shepherds and lab mixes and mutts of uncertain heritage, all of them hoping for attention for a chance for someone to choose them. Then I saw him, a golden retriever sitting calmly in the corner kennel, not barking or jumping like the others, just watching me with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see right through to whatever was broken inside me. "That is Cooper," the woman said, following my gaze. 4 years old. His family is relocating overseas and could not take him with them. He has been here about a week. "Can I meet him?" She opened the kennel door and Cooper walked out with dignity, not rushing, not desperate, just confident in his own worth. I crouched down to his level and he came over immediately, tail wagging in that full body way golden retrievers have, like their happiness starts at their nose and travels all the way through to the tip of their tail. He pushed his head under my hand and I scratched behind his ears. The connection was instant and undeniable, like we had known each other in some previous life and were just now remembering. This dog understood something about being left behind, about waiting for someone who would stay, about needing reliability instead of empty promises. "He is great with people," the woman continued. "House-trained, knows basic commands, loves car rides. He just needs someone who will not leave him behind." I looked into Cooper's eyes and felt something in my chest loosen. I understand that feeling. An hour later, after signing paperwork and paying adoption fees and getting instructions on his food preferences and vet records, Cooper was sitting in my passenger seat with his head hanging out the window. His ears flapped in the wind, his tongue lolled happily, and he looked like a dog who had just won the lottery. Both of us were driving towards something different, something better, something that felt like a second chance neither of us had expected to get. That first night, I set up a dog bed for Cooper in the corner of my bedroom, complete with blankets and toys the adoption center had sent home with us. But when I turned off the light and settled into my own bed, I heard the soft padding of paws on carpet. Cooper stood beside my bed looking at me with those wise eyes asking permission without words. "Come on up, boy." He jumped onto the bed with surprising grace for a dog his size and settled beside me with a contented sigh that sounded almost human. His warmth pressed against my side, his breathing slow and steady, his presence filling a void I had not fully acknowledged existed. For the first time in months, neither of us was alone. That evening, with Cooper settled at my feet under the kitchen table, his weight warm against my ankles, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar something I had been thinking about for days but had not quite admitted to myself until now. Best RVs for senior travel. The results flooded the screen. Articles about freedom and adventure, testimonials from retirees who had sold their houses, and hit the road reviews of different makes and models designed for extended travel. Photos of RVs parked at scenic overlook sunrise over desert landscapes, mountains reflected in pristine lakes. I clicked through page after page reading about Class A motorhomes and Class C options, gas versus diesel engines, floor plans optimized for solo travelers versus couples. Cooper shifted at my feet, his tail thumping against the floor as if he approved of this research, as if he somehow knew what I was planning. For decades I had put off traveling. When Dorothy was alive, we talked about it constantly. After I retire, we would say, after we save enough money, after the right time comes. But cancer does not care about your plans for later, and later became never. After Dorothy died, I still put it off. Alicia needed me, I told myself. I needed to be available in case she called, in case she needed help, in case she wanted her father around. I supported her dreams instead of pursuing my own. Her college education, her wedding, her house, always her, never me. Not anymore. The next morning, I loaded Cooper into my car and drove to Heartland RV Sales on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. The lot was filled with recreational vehicles of every size and description, from massive diesel pushers that looked like tour buses to compact camper vans barely bigger than a minivan. A salesman named Tom approached as I got out of the car, Cooper hopping down beside me with his leash in my hand. Tom was in his 50s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the dealership logo, his smile professional but genuine. "Beautiful dog," he said, crouching to let Cooper sniff his hand. "Looking for something for you and your best friend here. Something I can live in for extended periods, maybe months at a time, just me and him." Tom stood and gestured toward the lot. "Let me show you some options." We walked past the huge Class A motorhomes that cost more than my house and required a special license to drive. We passed the tiny camper vans that would have been too cramped for a man my size, plus a golden retriever. Finally, Tom stopped in front of a 27-foot Winnebago White, with tasteful striping large enough to be comfortable but small enough for me to handle confidently. "This is our most popular model for solo travelers," Tom said, unlocking the door. "Diesel engine gets decent mileage for its size. Full kitchen bathroom with shower bedroom in the back with a real mattress. Storage underneath for all your gear." I stepped inside and immediately felt at home. The layout was sensible and efficient. A driver's seat and passenger seat up front, then a small dining area that converted to extra sleeping space, a kitchenette with a 2-burner stove and microwave, a compact bathroom, and in the back, a bedroom with a queen-sized bed and storage cabinets. Not luxurious, but comfortable. Practical. Perfect. "Can I take it for a test drive?" "Absolutely. Let me grab the keys." And 20 minutes later, I was driving that Winnebago down a country road outside Cedar Falls, getting a feel for the size and handling. Cooper had claimed the passenger seat, immediately sitting upright with his head out the window, looking like he had been riding in RVs his entire life. Tom sat in the dining area giving me tips on turning radius and backing up, but mostly just letting me experience what it felt like to be behind the wheel of my own mobile freedom. "I will take it," I said when we returned to the dealership. "You want to think about it. Talk it over with family." "No family to talk to," I said simply. "And I have thought about it for 15 years. I am done thinking." I used the trade-in value of my second car, the sedan I barely drove anymore, and supplemented it with savings to pay cash for the RV. No loan, no monthly payments, just outright ownership of a vehicle that would take me anywhere I wanted to go. That afternoon, I spread maps across my kitchen table while Cooper watched from his new favorite spot on the couch. Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Glacier National Park, the Pacific Coast Highway, small towns I had read about but never visited, historical sites, scenic overlooks, places Dorothy and I had dreamed about seeing together. I would see them. Just me and Cooper. No schedule but our own. No one to answer to. No obligations except the ones we chose. Cooper walked over and put his head on my lap, his tail wagging slowly. He seemed to understand in that way dogs have that something important was happening, that we were about to embark on an adventure that would change both our lives. I scratched behind his ears and looked at those maps, feeling something I had not felt in longer than I could remember. Hope. I spent the next week preparing my house for a long absence. The mundane tasks of getting ready to leave felt significant somehow, each one a small declaration of independence. I called the post office and arranged for mail holding indefinite duration, able to be picked up whenever I returned. I contacted the utilities and switched them to minimal service plans. I set timers on lights to make the house look occupied, even when it sat empty. Mrs. Patterson from next door agreed to check on the property weekly water. My plants make sure nothing looked amiss. She was a widow in her 70s, kind-faced and discreet, the type of neighbor who minded her own business, but could be counted on in a crisis. "Taking a trip, James?" she asked when I explained what I needed. "Extended travel. Not sure how long I will be gone." She looked at me with knowing eyes that had seen her own share of life's disappointments. "Good for you. A man should see the world while he still can. I will take good care of things here." In loading the RV became a meditation on what mattered and what did not. Camping equipment went in first, chairs and a small table and cooking supplies designed for outdoor use. Cooper's gear filled one entire cabinet, his bed and food bowls and favorite toys, the tennis ball he loved to chase and the rope toy he carried everywhere like a security blanket. Clothes for all weather. Books I had been meaning to read. A laptop for staying connected to banking and email, but nothing else. In my office, I stood in front of the shelves holding photo albums documenting Alicia's entire life. Dozens of them chronologically arranged, each one a record of birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments that had seemed important enough to photograph. I reached for one near the beginning, the album from when she was between ages 4 and 7, before her mother got sick, before life became complicated, before disappointment changed both of us into people we had not meant to become. I flipped through pages showing a gap-toothed little girl on a swing set blowing out birthday candles, hugging a stuffed elephant sitting on my shoulders at the zoo. This was the daughter I wanted to remember. This was the relationship I wanted to carry with me. Not the recent years of manipulation and betrayal, but these early years when love was simple and uncomplicated. I packed that one album. The rest stayed on the shelves, records of a relationship that had grown toxic, reminders I did not need to carry into this new chapter of my life. 3 days before departure, Pastor William stopped by unannounced. I found him standing on my front porch when I came back from walking Cooper. His kind face creased with concern and something else. Pride, maybe, or approval. "Heard you were leaving town for a while," he said. "News travels fast." "It does in our community. Can I come in?" We sat at my kitchen table and I told him about the RV, about the plans to travel, about needing to do something for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, his pastoral wisdom knowing when to speak and when to simply bear witness. "This is good, James," he said finally. "This is right. You spent your whole life serving others, as a principal, as a father, as a member of our church. You poured yourself out until there was nothing left. Now it is time to serve yourself, time to fill your own cup back up." He stood and placed both hands on my shoulders, bowing his head. "Lord, watch over this man as he travels. Guide his path and protect his journey. Give him the peace he has earned and the joy he deserves. Bring him home safely when the time is right. Amen." "Amen," I echoed, surprised to find my eyes wet. The morning of departure arrived with perfect weather, sunny and mild, with just enough breeze to make the flags on the RV dealership wave gently. I did a final walk through of my house, checking that everything was secure, that nothing had been forgotten. I locked the front door and tested it twice, then stood on the porch looking at the home I had lived in for 38 years. Cooper was already in the RV's passenger seat, his tail wagging with excitement, somehow understanding that something wonderful was about to begin. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and heard the diesel engine rumble to life. The sound was powerful and reassuring, a promise of reliability and capability. I checked the connections one final time, made sure everything was secure, and then pulled out of my driveway. We drove slowly through Cedar Falls, past familiar streets and landmarks, saying goodbye to a life that no longer fit. We drove through downtown Cedar Falls, first past the coffee shop where I had my morning routine, past the hardware store where I had bought supplies for countless home improvement projects, past Mount Zion Baptist Church where I had worshipped for 35 years. Everything looked smaller somehow, like I was already seeing it from a distance, even though I was right there on Main Street. The elementary school where I had worked as a teacher before becoming principal. The park where I had pushed Alicia on swings when she was little. The library where Dorothy and I used to browse on Sunday afternoons. All these places that had been the landmarks of my life, the coordinates by which I had navigated my existence, suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's story. I turned onto Oak Avenue without consciously deciding, to some part of me needing to see it one last time. Number 847 came into view and I slowed the RV, not stopping but driving past slowly enough to take in the scene. Trevor and Monica's children were playing in the front yard, 2 kids who had not existed the last time I had been here, running through a sprinkler in the summer heat, their laughter carrying across the street. Monica was on the porch with a baby on her hip, watching them with the expression of contentment that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. The house looked alive now, filled with the noise and chaos and joy that families bring, finally serving the purpose it was designed for. Cooper barked happily from the passenger seat, his tail wagging at the sight of children playing. He had no idea of the complicated history tied to that house, no concept of betrayal or lawsuits or family drama. He just saw kids and joy and thought it looked like fun. I smiled and kept driving, leaving Oak Avenue behind for the last time. At the edge of town where Cedar Falls gave way to open farmland and the highway stretched toward the horizon, I saw the sign I had been waiting for. Green metal with white lettering, simple and direct. Montana, 850 miles. My hand rested firm and steady on the steering wheel. No trembling, no hesitation, no second guessing. This was the right decision. The only decision. The one I should have made years ago but was making now, and now was what mattered. Cooper had his head hanging out the passenger window, ears flapping in the wind tongue, out in that eternal dog smile that suggests all is right with the world. Maybe he was right. Maybe all was right with the world, or at least getting there 1 mile at a time. I turned on the radio and found my classical music station, though I knew it would fade to static within 50 miles and I would have to find something else. But for now, Mozart filled the RV, elegant and timeless, the soundtrack to a departure that felt more like a homecoming. The highway opened up before us, 4 lanes of possibility stretching toward a horizon I could not see but trusted was there. No destination deadline, no mandatory arrival time, no one waiting for us to show up on schedule, no obligations except the ones we chose. No one to please but myself and the golden retriever sitting beside me, asking for nothing more than companionship and an open window. For the first time in decades, possibly, for the first time since Dorothy died, and I took on the role of single father, I was truly free. Free to go where I wanted. Free to stay as long as I liked. Free to change my mind and turn around if something better appeared in the other direction. Free to make choices based solely on what brought me joy instead of what someone else needed from me. The Iowa cornfields blurred past on both sides, green and tall in the summer sun. Cooper barked once, sharp and excited, as if he too understood that this was not an ending but a beginning. I pressed the accelerator and we drove west toward mountains I had never seen and adventures I had never imagined possible. Both of us finally completely, beautifully free. 3 days of driving brought us to Montana, and I pulled off at a scenic overlook just as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The parking area was empty except for one other vehicle, a family loading up to leave after their own sunset viewing. I found a level spot, set the parking brake, and stepped out into air that smelled completely different from Iowa. Cleaner somehow. Thinner, carrying the scent of pine trees and snow-capped peaks even in summer. I pulled out my camping chair from the RV storage and set it up, facing west where the mountains created a jagged silhouette against the sky. Cooper jumped down and immediately began exploring, sniffing everything with the enthusiasm of a dog discovering an entirely new world. After a few minutes of investigation, he returned to me and settled at my feet, his warm weight pressing against my leg. The sunset was spectacular in a way that made me realize how many sunsets I had missed over the years. Not missed because I was not outside or not looking up, but missed because I had not really been present for them. My mind had always been elsewhere, worrying about Alicia, or planning for some obligation, or rehearsing some conversation I needed to have. But this sunset, I was fully here for it. The sky transformed through shades of orange and purple and pink that seemed impossible, like a painting too vivid to be believed. The mountains turned from solid rock to shadow, their peaks still catching the last light while their bases disappeared into darkness. The air cooled quickly, that dry mountain cold that is nothing like Iowa humidity, and I was glad I had brought a jacket. Cooper settled more deeply against my leg, peaceful and content, wanting nothing from me except my presence. No demands, no expectations, no hidden agendas or conditions on his affection. Just simple, loyal companionship. I reached down and petted his head, scratching behind his ears the way he liked, and let myself think about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had started it all, that text message excluding me from the Italy trip. The discovery of their lies when I saw those Facebook photos. The decision to take action instead of continuing to be used. The consequences that followed, swift and complete and irrevocable. Did I have regrets? I searched my heart honestly, sitting there in that camping chair with the mountains in front of me and my dog beside me. No, I had no regrets. Sadness, yes. Grief for the relationship I had thought I had with my daughter. Pain that things had come to this, but no regrets about the choices I had made. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, wanting to stay fully present in this moment, but curiosity won. I pulled it out and saw a text from Marcus. Thought you would want to know. Trevor and Monica just had their baby boy. They named him James. Said they wanted to honor the man who made their happiness possible. I stared at that text for a long moment, something warm expanding in my chest. A baby named James. New life beginning in the house where so much disappointment had lived. The circle completing itself in a way I had not anticipated. I typed back a simple response. That means more than they know. Thank you for telling me. Life went on. That was the lesson, maybe the most important one. Life went on whether you held on to the past or let it go. New families moved into old spaces. Children were born and given names that meant something to their parents. The world kept turning regardless of individual dramas and betrayals and hard lessons learned. Cooper leaned more heavily against my leg, his breathing slow and steady, completely at peace. I looked back at the sunset, now fading to deep purple, and the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The mountains had become pure silhouette black cutouts against a canvas of color. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, Alicia was living in her in-laws' basement, working through the consequences of choices that had seemed so justified in the moment. Learning hard lessons about respect and boundaries and the difference between love and enabling. I hoped she was learning them. I hoped she would become a better person because of this experience. But that was her journey now, not mine. Here in this moment, with the Montana sky putting on a show just for anyone willing to stop and watch, with my dog's warmth against my leg and absolute freedom stretching out before me like the highway I had traveled, I was at peace. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The stars multiplied as the sky went fully dark, more stars than I had ever seen in Cedar Falls, where light pollution washed out all but the brightest. Out here, they filled the sky with possibilities, each one a destination I could choose or ignore as I pleased. My journey was just beginning, and this time, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was traveling toward joy instead of away from pain. That made all the difference. 6 months after leaving Cedar Falls, I sat in a camping chair at the edge of the Grand Canyon, watching the sunrise paint the ancient rock walls in shades of red and gold that defied description. Cooper lay beside me, his head resting on my foot, both of us silent witnesses to a show that happened every morning but never got old. My journal lay open on my lap, a habit I had started somewhere in Wyoming and maintained ever since. The pages were filled with observations and reflections that would have seemed silly to write down before this journey but now felt essential. Yellowstone's geysers erupting with clockwork precision. The massive redwoods along the Pacific coast that made me feel simultaneously insignificant and connected to something timeless. Small-town diners where waitresses called everyone honey and the coffee was always fresh. People I had met along the way, other travelers with their own stories of loss and renewal, of leaving behind what no longer served them and driving toward what might. My phone stayed in the RV, most days powered off unnecessary. Once a week I checked email, and banking made sure my house in Cedar Falls was still standing, confirmed that automatic payments were processing correctly. That was enough connection to my old life. 2 months ago, an email from Alicia had appeared in my inbox, short and to the point. Dad, we moved into a small apartment. 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but it is ours. Brad found work with a new company, better culture, less travel. We started going to therapy both together and separately. It is hard but helping. I am still sorry for everything. I hope you are happy wherever you are. I had sat with that email for 2 days before responding, making sure my answer came from a place of peace rather than pain. I am happy. I am glad you are getting help and moving forward. Be well. That was enough. No promises of reconciliation, no invitation to visit, no softening of the boundaries I had set. Just acknowledgement that we were both alive, both trying, both learning how to be better versions of ourselves. The sun cleared the canyon rim, and the full depth of the geological wonder revealed itself. Layers of time made visible millions of years of patient erosion, creating something breathtaking. Cooper stirred and looked up at me, his tail wagging slowly, ready for whatever came next. "Ready for breakfast, boy," he barked once, sharp and enthusiastic. I closed my journal, stood up with only a slight twinge in my knees, and walked back toward the RV where coffee and kibble and another day of absolute freedom waited. 3 days later, I pulled into a rest stop outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The morning was already hot, that dry desert heat that makes you drink water constantly without realizing it. Cooper needed a walk and I needed coffee, so we stepped out into the bright sunshine and headed toward the picnic area where a few other travelers were taking breaks from the road. An elderly black man was walking a small terrier mix along the path, moving slowly but with purpose, his gait suggesting knees that had seen better days but still got him where he needed to go. He was older than me, maybe early 80s, wearing a faded baseball cap and a shirt that said, "Montana is for lovers," which made me smile. Our dogs approached each other with the cautious optimism dogs have when meeting strangers, sniffing and circling, deciding whether to be friends or indifferent. Cooper's tail wagged and the terrier seemed agreeable, so we ended up walking together, our pace matching naturally. "Nice dog," the man said. "Golden retrievers are good souls." "Yours too. What is his name?" "Her name is Daisy. She is 12, been with me through thick and thin." He looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot of life. "George, by the way." "James." We walked in comfortable silence for a bit, just 2 old men with dogs, no need to fill every moment with words. Eventually, George asked the question that seemed to matter. "So what are you doing out here, James? Running from something or towards something?" I thought about that for a moment, appreciating that he asked it as an either-or question, but understanding it was probably both for most people. "Both, I guess." He nodded like that made perfect sense. Same. Spent 40 years taking care of ungrateful kids. Gave them everything, got back criticism and demands for more. Finally said enough. Sold my house, bought an RV, hit the road. Best decision I ever made. You do not regret it. Hell no. Should have done it 20 years earlier. Would have saved myself a lot of heartache. He threw a stick for Daisy, who trotted after it without much enthusiasm. You. Similar story. Daughter and her husband. Used me for years, called me needy when I finally set boundaries. Threatened to put me in a nursing home and sell my house. I surprised myself with how easily the words came, so I sold their house instead. George let out a sharp laugh that turned into a cough. Good for you, brother, good for you. Do you miss them? I asked. Your kids. He considered this carefully. I miss the idea of them. The fantasy I had in my head about what our relationships would be like. Holidays together, grandkids visiting, all that Hallmark card nonsense. But the reality, the actual people they turned into. Not so much. What about you? I thought about Alicia, about that little girl who held my hand at her mother's funeral, about the woman who excluded me from Italy and spent my money while calling me demanding. Sometimes. But I do not miss who I was when I was with them. Just an ATM with a heartbeat. That version of me needed to die so this version could live. George stopped walking and looked at me with something like recognition. Then you already learned the lesson, James. Most people never get there. They keep hoping the other person will change, keep sacrificing themselves, keep enabling bad behavior and calling it love. But you figured it out. What lesson? He smiled and gave Daisy's leash a gentle tug. You will know when you are ready to name it. We parted ways at the parking lot, George heading north and me heading south, two old men who would probably never see each other again, but had shared something important in the span of 15 minutes. As I watched his RV pull onto the highway, Cooper beside me with his tail wagging, I thought about his words. The lesson. I already knew what it was. I had been living it for 6 months. Maybe it was time to name it. Here is what 77 years taught me. Real love requires courage to disappoint people. True generosity means knowing when to stop giving. Family earns its title through action, not DNA. I spent decades believing sacrifice proved devotion. Wrong. Sacrifice without reciprocity is not noble. It is erasure. The bravest thing I did was not selling that house. It was deciding I deserved better, that my peace mattered more than their comfort, that being called cruel was preferable to being called useful. They may never understand, but I finally do. You cannot love others well until you love yourself enough to demand respect. That lesson was 77 years coming, worth every hard mile. Do not wait 77 years to learn this lesson. Subscribe to this channel right now for more stories about ordinary people who found the courage to demand respect from their own family.